Hello and welcome. My name is Greg Crawford. I'm the editor of TABB Forum. Joined today by Steve Grob, Director of Group Strategy at Fidessa. Steve, thanks for coming by.
Hey Greg, how are you?
Good, thank you. It's good to see you. We're going to spend some time talking about consolidation in the European marketplace with regard to trading venues, if you will. And so there's been a lot of talk about the Chi-X BATS merger, and that has kind of led to some discussion around the broader discussion of consolidation in that space, Steve. And there are some smaller players that you guys have identified through the work that you do in terms of the fragmentation and finding out where trading volumes are going. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about kind of where these smaller players are and what they're doing and how they're faring in terms of capturing some of that market share.
I mean, one of the things that's interesting, Greg, is we've looked at obviously the primary exchanges, but we've also looked at some of the smaller, less well-known MTFs, such as Aqueduct and one from Holland called Tom. And it's interesting because what they're doing now is they're focusing on very specific parts rather than trying to take the big boys on every front. So Aqueduct, for example, is focusing very much on French-listed stocks.
Okay.
And most of its volume now is coming out of Paris-listed stocks. And alternatively, Tom is doing exactly the same thing to NYSE Euronext, but the other side of Europe in Amsterdam. And again, that by focusing on those particular areas, they seem to be making some good headway.
So can you tell us, in terms of the headway that they're making, I mean, is it significant enough where, say, the people at NYSE Euronext need to start paying attention, or is it more just kind of noise given the size of the NYSE Euronext, for instance?
I think that's a great question. Certainly when we look at it, the numbers, the total numbers are still fairly modest, certainly compared to the massive volumes that are done on the primary markets. But on the other hand, there's enough of these things going on now, so one becomes two, and I think that they're certainly going up the irritation scale for the big guys.
Right. We were talking earlier, and you mentioned kind of the two key numbers that in terms of levels that you need to cross to become significant and then more significant. Can you tell me a little bit about that again?
Yeah, I mean, what we found with our fragmentation index is that there's two numbers, 5% and 10%.
Okay.
When you get to 5% of the traded volume in a particular stock or an index, what seems to happen, Greg, is that people's smart routers are then dialed in to that particular venue, and that liquidity then begets more liquidity. And ditto, when it reaches 10%, then the buy side sort of wakes up and notices and then starts asking its broker community whether they're connected to that particular venue.
Okay. So I guess one of the things that we need to do is watch as these smaller players develop and if they cross those thresholds. So, in this development, as these things continue to take place, Steve, sort of who's the enemy here? I mean, how do you see it kind of perhaps shaking out?
Well, I think that's a question a lot of the big exchanges, particularly in Europe, are having to ask themselves. Is their enemy the smaller MTFs, or is NYSE Euronext enemy actually the London Stock Exchange and Deutsche Börse? And you can see that the axis of trading in Europe is very much being done now, not along national boundaries, but on a pan-European basis. And so the large national exchanges are kind of faced with an imperative really now to trade and list on a European basis.
Right. Interesting. Well, certainly, volumes do seem to be picking up this year,
Yes,
so that's, I guess, good for everybody involved. And fortunately, we have something like the fragmentation index to keep track of this stuff. So we'll continue to watch this and see how it develops, and perhaps we can touch base in a couple of months and see where things stand.
Very good. Thanks for having me.
So again, my name is Greg Crawford, the editor of TABB Forum, joined by Steve Grob, Director of Group Strategy at Fidessa. Thanks for joining us.